Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this evening's webinar brought to you by the Association of Muslim Schools, also known as AMS. Now, this evening's webinar is brought to you in conjunction with AMS and its RSE team. The team had been working tirelessly over the last few months on a program of activities which we hope to inshallah share with you over the next hour or so. Next slide, please. The plan that we inshallah intend to share with you is a topic which is centered around challenging RSE subjects, challenging RSE lessons which we might find difficult to deliver, we might struggle with content, or lessons that we're just not comfortable with. So we hope, inshallah, that the scheme of work that we've developed over the last few months today is about giving you a bit of a taster, a bit of an idea of what we've been working on, and to, inshallah, give you a little bit of confidence behind the curriculum that we've developed. As I mentioned, the session is an hour long. The session is being recorded and will be live on YouTube over the next 24 hours. What I would ask all delegates to do is, if you do have any questions, please do ask on the chat. And what we will try and do is towards the end of the session, we'll try and answer as many of those questions as we can. And if we can't get through the questions, then we'll try and email a response and get them onto our website, onto our FAQ section. If anybody is joining us and isn't familiar with the AMS is an organization that's been around for many years. It's actually been in existence since 1992. It's an organization that is recognized by the Department for Education, okay? It's an organization that's been collaborating with the Department for Education over this particular topic over the last couple of years. So it's very much involved and has been from the start. As an organization, it's driven by supporting its member schools and non-member schools, should I say, with regards to all things that matter in relation to full-time Islamic schooling. We're very much a grassroots organization, so we're very much collaborating with the schools spread up and down the country, and there's more than 100 schools within our membership. All those schools together represent over 50,000 young people. That's an incredible amount of people and students and young people that we're supporting, and that number is only growing. I won't say any further with regards to the association and what it does. What I would suggest that you do when you get in a moment is jump onto the website, ams-uk.org, and there's a great website there with all things AMS, as well as RSE, which I'll go into a little bit later. Next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to be talking a lot during this session, but the person that is Talal Hussain. Talal is our curriculum manager. I like to say curriculum architect. He's, mashallah, the brains behind this curriculum that's been developed. And he will run through with you during this session a couple of, as I mentioned, tasters of some lessons that he's been working on, and that's been developed by him and his team over the last couple of months. Talal is somebody who is very experienced in curriculum development. He's somebody who's a practitioner, who's taught, who's led schools, and he's very much part of this RSE team from the outset. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Brother Talal. Assalamu alaikum, Talal.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallahu khair, Brother Abdul Wadud. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem amma ba'd. Thank you all for joining this webinar on challenging RSE lessons. The agenda for this presentation is a very brief synopsis of the background to the AMS RSE curriculum, a quick review of the statutory guidance, and a detailed look at our approach to delivering relationships and sex education. And we'll be considering 2 lessons, one from primary and one from secondary. A bit of background, as Brother Abdul Wadud mentioned, AMS has been involved with the DFE and other faith groups from the start and started the consultative process regarding relationships and sex education. And it continues to be involved. This has ensured that the concerns our member schools have had regarding RSE have, now schools have had proper representation regarding their concerns. In terms of the RSE curriculum, who is the RSE curriculum for? It's for Muslim schools and beyond. Independent Muslim schools, state-funded Muslim schools, state schools with the majority of Muslim pupils. Over 90%, close to 95, really, over 90% of Muslim children go to state schools. How is RSE being taught to them? With what narrative, what approach, which perspective? So this RSE curriculum can be used by state schools as well. It's for parents. Parents need to be active. They need to know what is being taught in the schools their children go to. And they need to have alternatives at hand. I've talked to some parents who were involved with some schools where they weren't happy with the curriculum that the school was using. And the school turned around to them and said, okay, you're not happy with this curriculum. Have you got an alternative? What alternative do you have? So we're hopeful that this RSE curriculum can be that alternative. And the guidance, the statute guidance is quite clear that parents must be consulted. The question for us is how many of our parents are actively involved in the consultative process with their schools. It's something the parents need to really get engaged with. And this curriculum is for the wider community, for organizations such as madrasas, maktabs, supplementary schools, clubs, youth centers. The challenges our children are facing, growing up in this country, need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed home, at school, in maktabs, in madrasas, in the community, in society, if we really want our children to be able to overcome these challenges. So we've chosen a three-phase approach to our curriculum. Phase 1, resources are available now for download. Phase 2, the summer term resources will be available next month, and I'm going to share some of the lesson plans in a moment. And phase 3, the full curriculum by June 2021, inshallah. Please visit our website for all our RSE resources. Go to RSE Hub on the AMS website and you can see our resources. I went through this, the documentation and statutory guidance in detail in the previous webinar, which is available for download from the AMS website. Here, I want to only go through the statutory content for delivery so that we are able to see how the statutory content has been mapped, our long-term overviews, how from our long-term overviews, medium-term plans have been generated, and how from these medium-term plans, individual lesson plans have been produced. So the key document is this one. The key document is this one. Relationships and sex education, statutory guidance. I'm only looking at the content here. So if I go down to page 20, page 20 sets out what needs to be taught by the end of primary. I've mentioned this previously in the previous the webinar. It's important that secondary schools are aware of what's been taught in primary because secondary content builds upon primary. And as you can see, the key areas, the key modules that need to be covered are families and people who care for me, caring friendships, respectful relationships, online relationships, and being safe. Now, in terms of the content which is challenging for some Muslim schools, it really comes down to this the main objective is the one I've just highlighted here, about marriage. That marriage represents a formal and legal recognized commitment of two people to each other, which is intended to be lifelong. And we see that there's a footnote here, and in the footnote mentions that marriage in England and Wales is available to both opposite sex and same-sex couples. So in terms of delivering content from primary, this is where a lot of schools may find the challenge. And we'll go through a lesson in a moment, touching upon these, a lesson which focuses on these subjective in a moment. If I move down into secondary, on page 27, the secondary content and the modules for secondary are families, respectful relationships, including friendships, online and media, being safe, intimate and sexual relationships, including sexual health. As I mentioned before, primary is relationships education, secondary is relationships and sex education. Importantly, we are not told at what age the content needs to be taught. Content mentions by the end of secondary school, by the end of primary school. It is up to each school to decide how to map the content to each year group. And one of the important things to think about is age appropriateness. At what point is it age appropriate to teach certain content? So we're not told at what age the content needs to be taught, neither are we told how it needs to be taught. In other words, with which narrative, with which perspective. For more detail around this, have a look at the previous webinar where I discuss in detail how different schemes present different narratives. So, our RSE curriculum starting with scheme of work, a starting point for the development of the scheme of work then was to map the statutory content to year groups, resulting in our long-term overviews for primary and secondary. A lot of you will have seen this already. This is a primary overview, and we have the different modules: families, caring friendships, relationships, online relationships, being safe. We have, and we've mapped the objectives over this 39 objectives from families in year 1 to the end of summer 2 in year 6, being safe, 39 objectives. So we've taken the objectives from statutory content and mapped them onto this long-term overview for primary. Done the same for secondary, mapping families, respectful relationships, including friendship, online and media, and being safe, and intimate and sexual relationships, including sexual health, into a framework for secondary. In year 11, because the students finish school early, by spring 1, they're preparing for exams, there are only 3 modules for them to do. If I just go in a bit of detail then, let me just end this for a moment. If I just go into a bit of detail of our primary long-term overview, what that looks like, and how from the long-term overview, from the, sorry, one moment. One moment. Okay, so from the long-term overview, we have developed some medium-term plans which take each objective from the statutory content, and we develop this objective into a narrative. The narrative in the medium-term plans. These are the objectives we want our students to achieve, medium-term plans. And these are mapped out from year 1 all the way to year 6 in primary, as you can see. And I'll be looking at autumn term 2, families, marriage, including legal perspectives in detail in a moment, where we look at the different perspectives on marriage. So that's the primary. That's the primary. In terms of secondary, the same mapping exercise, taking the statutory content, developing that into a narrative in terms of the medium-term plans. And for example, if we look at autumn term 2 here, which is meeting the objective about families, marriage, legal status, rights and protections that are not available to unmarried couples, why marriage is important, and why it must be freely entered into. These are the objectives we want to focus on. What marriage is, including its legal status, nikah ceremonies, that they can be either legally registered or unregistered, and the consequence of each. Importance of marriage in Islam, that marriage is a choice and must be freely entered into. So that just gives an example of how the statutory content is then put into our narrative. So you can have a look at that. You can download this from the AMS website and have a look at in detail the objectives. Okay, so in terms of primary, then one thing that is obvious and it is obvious is that all schools will need to edit the plans so that they work for them. School needs to take the plans and make it work for their school, their children, and adapt it. A plan really is a plan. It's there to be adapted and tweaked to meet the needs of the learners, the community. For us as curriculum developers, you know, our plans are constantly evolving, and there's a constant evolution to our plans. And as feedback has been coming in, we're already in the process of, you know, improving these plans. Like I said, in terms of primary, then challenging topics really are in year 6. We put them in year 6, and the objectives are Objective 8 and Objective 9. Objective 8, types of families and how we respect differences, and Objective 9, marriage including legal perspectives. Why are these challenging? Because of the issue, do we need to mention same-sex relationships at primary? There are 4 questions to consider here. Firstly, is it a statutory requirement to do this? I would say yes. In a moment, I'll share the reasons for this. Secondly, is it age appropriate? This is a question for each school. At year 6, will the children be aware of same-sex relationships? And I would say yes. You can walk down the street and you can see billboards, and there'll be billboards mentioning same-sex relationships. You can be sitting at home watching football, and in the adverts, there'll be an advert which will mention same-sex relationships. So, will children at year 6 be aware of this? I think so. Thirdly, should we discuss this from an Islamic perspective? Should we discuss this content from an Islamic perspective? And again, I would say yes. How can we present a counter argument if you're not acknowledging the issue? You have to acknowledge the issue to be able to present a counter narrative. And fourthly, do we have a duty to do this? And again, I will say yes. We have to prepare our children to counter the challenges they face in preserving their faith in our society. We can't simply ignore the issues and hope they'll go away. So let's have a look at a summary of the guidance. I'll put a summary together, so I'm just going to open this up. Now, time is quite limited, and I'm not going to go in depth of reading this whole document to you. I'm just going to touch upon the key points from this document. In this document, I've looked at the key guidance documents that are out there and what conclusions we can draw from them. So, number one, statutory guidance. The statutory guidance mentions this about marriage, I've just touched upon. What can we conclude from this? Pupils need to be taught about different types of families, that marriage takes place between two people and is available to both opposite and same-sex couples. That's what I got from the statutory guidance. The next document is the RSE FAQs document, which is available on the website. And from the FAQs, there's a question, will my child be taught about LGBT relationships? And there's an answer given on that. And the key response is this one at the bottom here. Primary schools are strongly encouraged and enabled to cover LGBT content when teaching about different types of families. What can we conclude from this? Teaching about same-sex relationships is strongly encouraged, but not a requirement. Okay, so we've got two different contrasting conclusions we can draw. Next, we've had a look at the Ofsted guidance. From the Ofsted guidance again, what do we conclude? Pupils should demonstrate understanding of protected characteristics, i.e., it's against the law to discriminate against anyone because of these issues here, and sexual orientation being one of them. Ofsted guidance continued. What can we conclude from this? Pupils need to be taught about laws. The Law, Equalities Act, and the teaching should be age appropriate. And finally, from the independent school standards, what can we conclude from this? Schools have to actively encourage respect for protected characteristics to the extent that it's considered age appropriate to do so. So if you take all the guidance and sift through it, I would say that it needs to be, from an equalities point of view, from a protected characteristics point of view, we need to mention same-sex relationships. Again, if a school feels that they don't want to, that's their choice, and they can not mention this, but I would strongly suggest that they do. Just open this one up. Well, that was really the main kind of crux of the challenging topics in primary. In secondary, in terms of challenging topics, we're looking at intimate and sexual relationships. All of that really is quite challenging to deliver. And to be honest, majority of the other modules are also quite challenging. Online and media, when you start looking at harmful content, material, pornography, sexual harassment and violence, these are all kind of challenging topics that will be quite difficult to deliver. So let's have a look at the process for developing our resources for challenging topics. I think the first example I'm going to show you is from secondary. These the statutory content states that there are a range of strategies. I'm just going to take two objectives from the statutory content. There are a range of strategies for identifying and managing sexual pressure, including understanding peer pressure, resisting pressure, and not pressurizing others, and that they have a choice. People should know that they have a choice to delay sex or to enjoy intimacy without sex. These are two objectives from the module about intimate sexual relationships. So before I'll show you how we have taken these objectives and put them into a lesson plan. I just want to share how some other schemes have done this and what lesson plans they've produced. So have a quick look at this one here. In this example, the writers of this scheme, they've merged certain objectives which are different to the ones we've merged. And here they're exploring sexual pressure alongside pleasure and first-time sex. So just have a quick read of the objectives, you get an idea of, you know, the narrative here.
Brother Talal, apologies to interrupt. Do you want to just go into presenter view? It will just make the screen a little bit larger.
Presenter view, okay. Yeah. So you can just have a look at the objectives. Further down in the lesson plan, this is what we get. The perspective here is you have a choice to have sex. When you decide to have a sex, you need to consider these things. Almost as an afterthought, there is a discussion around marriage at the bottom here. Here's another extract from a lesson. Again, a greater emphasis on first-time sex and choosing to delay this. How we approached these objectives. So we've looked at peer pressure in a previous lesson and grouped choice to delay sex with sexual pressure in this double lesson that I'm going to share with you. And you can see that we've expanded on these this objective here into this narrative, which is to recognize the role of those around us, including the media, in promoting certain sexual behaviors, to recognize how to manage sexual pressure from peer, society, and the media, to recognize why people of faith, including Muslims, choose to delay sex, to recognize Islamic perspectives on celibacy, delaying sex, and sexual. So that's the background to the statutory content, from the statutory content, mapping it to our long-term overviews, from the long-term overview, mapping out some medium-term objectives, and from there, the lesson plan. So I'm just going to share the lesson plan with you now. This lesson is for year 11, autumn term 2, and we've got the title there. Our lessons follow the approach of a four-part approach: engagement, explanation or exploration, and then elaboration. This overview page outlines the lesson structure. This is a double lesson. The suggested timings are on the side, and the type of activities for each aspect are given here. A lesson plan, like I said, is a lesson plan. It has to be adjusted and adapted to the needs of the learners, and there will be some differentiation required for some of the learners. Moving on, here we are highlighting the overall aim, the lesson objectives, and the lesson outcomes. We're essentially presenting our narrative to meet the statutory objectives. What's our narrative here? In simple terms, you have a choice to delay sex. You should choose to delay sex because of these reasons. Once you have chosen to delay sex, then you have to deal with sexual pressure. And next, this is how to deal with sexual pressure. Key vocabulary, resources are all self-explanatory there. Engagement activity. In this activity, we want the pupils to identify the reasons teenagers of all backgrounds choose to delay sex. Not everyone is having sex. You know, in fact, 70% of young people are choosing to delay sex, and this is for a multitude of reasons. Our RSE scheme and these lesson plans are there to support our children, to make them aware of the challenges they are going to face, and to equip them with the knowledge, the skills, and the strength of character to be able to overcome these. Here we review our previous learning emphasizing once again that at the top here, once again, we emphasize a marriage in Islam is between a man and a woman, and that no sex relations can take place prior to marriage. Definitions are given here for fornication. You can introduce zina as well. So we've looked at the reasons young people choose not to have sex. But what about culturally and historically? Until recently, most people were religious. They would take their moral standpoint from their faith. How do the major world faiths view sex, celibacy, chastity, and sex outside marriage? What do we conclude on this activity? That chastity is valued by all faiths, and that sex outside marriage is wrong for all faiths. Buddhism being the exception, as they do not have a formal concept of marriage. Again, here the Islamic viewpoint is presented alongside other faiths with more detail, with references from Quran and Hadith. The optional task allows for an exam-style question to be tackled, the type of question that they would get in an RSE, in a religious studies exam. So engagement and explanation have looked at choosing to delay sex and why people would choose this option. Moving on here, in the exploration part of the lesson, we focus on sexual pressure. Firstly, by learning about peer pressure from a previous lesson, then by defining sexual pressure, and then by getting pupils to consider how our friends, the media, and society influence our attitudes and behaviors towards sex and sexual relationships. Finally, we look at, in the elaboration phase, we look at how to manage sexual pressure by watching a video and reading a response from a scholar regarding practical steps to manage sexual pressure. The pupils complete a task of producing a leaflet of top 10 tips to manage sexual pressure. And the resources are quite comprehensive to go with this. This faith perspectives, the Islamic perspective in quite detail, and the other faith perspectives there, and the different activities. There's a scholarly response to managing sexual pressure. So that's an example from secondary, how we've taken some challenging, a challenging statutory objective and tackled it in such a way that the topic is explored in depth. Discussion is allowed, but it's controlled discussion, and it's presented with a clear narrative. I.e., you have a choice to have sex or delay sex. You should choose delay sex because of these reasons. And once you accept it to delay sex, you'll need to identify and manage sexual pressure. You can manage sexual pressure by using this approach. That was the example for secondary. Here's the example for primary. Just give me one moment. We've discussed the issues around the statutory content regarding marriage, including legal perspectives. Again, the lesson overview with the timings and the different types of activities. Here we're exploring, again, this is our narrative. We're exploring reasons for people getting married, considering the faith perspectives, including Islamic, and looking in detail at events leading to marriage for Muslims. Because this lesson has a focus on legal perspectives, including civil partnership, similarities and differences between these are considered. Engagement phase, here reasons for marriage are discussed, including some more traditional or obscure ones, like, someone to cook the thing for me. And it's an opportunity for us to discuss this. And also, protect from sin is a reason. And this can be elaborated on and discussed in detail if required in terms of sexual relationships, again, age appropriateness. So our resource here goes through the different reasons that pupils might come up with. Next, in terms of explanation, here we begin to mention same-sex relationships, and they are mentioned in the context of marriage and civil partnership. It's a factual point, i.e. that same-sex marriage is a legal right in this country. At the end of this section, at the bottom here, the teacher highlights the Islamic viewpoint on same-sex marriage. That is legally allowed in the UK, but in Islam it is not allowed, and this is because marriage is an act of worship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the guidelines on how to enter into, as well as how to maintain. At this point, the questions arise, do we want to open this point up for further debate? What if our pupils are inquisitive and want further discussion and clarification regarding same-sex relationships? Or shouldn't we deal with it in the classroom rather than allowing pupils to work it out for themselves? We as writers have decided that further debate should take place at Key Stage 3. You as a school, depending on your learners and your children, may decide that actually this is the right time now to open up this for further debate. We'll provide a lesson from Key Stage 3 where this is debated in a more detailed way. The lesson from Key Stage 3, we will provide that for schools with the Key Stage 3 package, inshallah. So if they decide they want to open up this debate further, they can use that lesson template. In the exploration phase, then, different faith perspectives are explored here, including Islamic. And again, a comprehensive resource is given, which highlights the different viewpoints. The students get an opportunity to research this. In the elaboration phase, we start to focus on marriage in Islam, and the pupils get an opportunity to differentiate between marriage in other faiths and cultures and Islam. And they begin to think about, the things that happen, the processes that happen in Islamic marriage. As you can see, I'll just share the resources. They're quite comprehensive. The resources quite comprehensive, detailed. Writers. Okay. So that's really a really brief and a really quick summary of our approach to delivering RSE. I'm going to hand over in a moment to Brother Abdul Wadud for any questions, answers, and for him to finish off the presentation. But before I do, let me just summarize our approach. We have taken the statutory content and mapped it to our long-term overviews. From these long-term overviews, we have created medium-term plans which give a clear narrative and perspective. From these medium-term plans, we have created lesson plans which firstly allow for controlled discussion, secondly give clear Islamic viewpoints, thirdly consider legal and statutory perspectives, and fourthly are written such that with the intention that and our clear objective so that with the intention that our clear objective is met, that which is that to prepare our children for life in modern day Britain so that they are equipped with knowledge, the skills, the strength of character to overcome the challenges that they currently face, the challenges they are going to continue to face in the future. Whether RSE was statutory, RSE has become statutory, but even if RSE was not statutory, we really got a duty to this, to look at these difficult topics and to make a safe place in our schools to be able to discuss these and allow our children to understand the topics, to be aware of the alternative narratives, and to have a strength of understanding that, yes, this is the perspective of Islam. I understand the reasons for this. And yes, I would choose to follow this. I would choose to follow this. Just like this lesson, the choice to delay sex. Yes, a choice. We have a choice to choose. We have a choice either to have sex outside marriage, or we have a choice to delay sex. Unfortunately, it's not enough. Our strength of Iman is not enough. Our strength of Iman is not there, that just knowing that it's haram would be enough for those people whose Iman is strong. But unfortunately for us, our Iman is weak, so that's not enough. We need to understand everything around it, and that's the point. So, Jazakallah khair for once again for joining us in his webinar. I'll be still involved in the Q&A, inshallah, and I'm just going to hand over to Brother Abdul Wadud.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Talal. MashaAllah, another fantastic representation of the work that's been done behind the scenes by the team within AMS. Jazakallah khair to everybody for all your kind words. It means a lot. What we're going to do now is we're going to have a short Q&A. So Brother Talal, if you could just go into presenter view and then jump into the Q&A slide, please. In the meantime, if anybody does have any questions, feel free to ask them on the chat. We're not going to have too much time to take too many questions. There isn't that many to go through at the moment. So by all means, do ask. And if we can't get through all the questions, whether it be that you asked when you were registering for the event or over the chat, inshallah, we'll, like I said at the beginning, we'll cover them in the FAQ section, or we'll separately email them the answers across to you. Now, so Brother Talal, a few questions that the audience is asking. Number one, were these resources made using the curriculum or looking at curriculum makers such as Jigsaw, etc., or both?
Well, we've had a look at the different curricula out there, because we needed to do a bit of research initially to try to understand the approach of the different curricula out there, the particular narrative. But in terms of using their resources, these are, mashallah, our writers are quite talented, alhamdulillah. It's from their, from them, to be honest. The resources are, developed from their own understanding of the topic, their research. Obviously, they've done some research, but the original lesson plans. Does that answer that question?
I think, Jazakallah khair for the answer. I think if I can just contribute towards that, I know that Brother Talal and the team have done an enormous amount of research in this particular topic. And as Brother Talal shared earlier on, examples of other narratives, other curriculums, which were looked at whilst we were developing our own. So I think, along the way, we have looked at the particular scheme that was mentioned, as well as others along the way. So there's lots of questions flooding in, so I'm going to try and get through as many of them as possible. A question, Brother Talal, how would you manage scenarios where where a student discloses they have feelings for someone of the same gender? So assume you're delivering a lesson and there's a disclosure from a child. Are you able to give any advice, maybe as to maybe how the teacher should be approaching such a subject in preparing for such disclosures?
That's a really tough question, to be honest. I mean, from a statutory perspective, if someone mentions this, then of course we have to be sensitive to their needs and with them, and is their choice. I mean, the key point here is choice, and we're not here to force an opinion on anybody. We're here to present different perspectives and different opinions. Ultimately, the choice is with the student. So in terms of actually how you would deal with that in detail, I would say that's quite a challenging thing to do, and I probably wouldn't feel I could advise that well on how to do that, to be honest. It's not something I have ever encountered.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Talal. If I can just add a little to that as well, I think it's about preparation more than anything. And we were recently having a conversation about the developing training materials to support teachers and those that will be delivering the content in the classrooms. And I think it's about being able to prepare teachers as to what they would do should a conversation like that come up, how the school prepares, and how the lesson itself is sensitive towards such discussion. So I think, inshallah, watch this space. I think our training will, inshallah, cover some of the areas that we've just spoken about just this second. Another question that's just come in, and maybe I can quickly just answer that. Do you introduce these lessons to state schools in the UK? The short and long answer of that is that no, it's not up to us to introduce it as such. We are developing a curriculum, and it's a choice for independent schools or state schools to buy into. We have pitched it so it's suited towards our member schools first and foremost, and then beyond that, inshallah, we are looking at ways and means that we can support state sector, supplementary schools, and so on and so forth. So again, watch this space. This might be something that will be accessible and available to everybody across the sphere of education in the UK and beyond, inshallah. Okay. How can we access all the plans? Is there a price to accessing all the plans? I'll cover that in my next slide. But the short answer to that is you can access the plans with regards to what we've released so far. And then as we release more of our planning moving forward, there is a small fee associated with it. And just to clarify, the reason that there is a fee is because there is a team behind this to develop this scheme. So hopefully that answers your question there. There was a question earlier on, the list, how have we, so Brother Talal, there was a question earlier on with regards to how have the objectives been defined and developed within the long and medium term planning?
The long-term objectives are taken from the statutory content, and the medium-term objectives are what we have developed as writers, the narrative we want to present. So you can take an objective and you can present it in different ways. I gave some examples of that with choosing to delay sex. You can group objectives together, like the results I shared, like they had done, where they grouped choosing to delay sex with first-time sex, pressure and pleasure. They group those objectives together so they can fit a particular narrative. And we've chosen to group certain objectives together to meet our narrative. Our medium-term objectives are our objectives, something that we've developed. We have looked at PSAT Association and their objectives. and taken some of them, like expanding on some of those. The majority are our own objectives that we've developed so that they fit our narrative.
Jazakallah khair, brother. Again, I'm only going to go through a couple of more questions. With regards to who's been involved in this process, what I would ask you all to do is jump onto our YouTube page and watch some of the previous videos that we've done and webinars that we've done on this particular topic. It will give you an insight into the process with regards to AMS from a couple of years back when they sat around the table with the DFE through to working with local grassroots organisations and how we've basically got to this stage. Now, just a couple of more questions. Okay, so people are asking with regards to the curriculum, who's it available to, who's not available to. It's available to everybody and anybody, okay? There is a cost associated to it, but what I would suggest to those parents who are on this webinar, who are not necessarily a school as such, but they're interested in presenting this maybe to a school that their child goes to, I would at the first instance speak to the head teacher, the person who's in charge of your curriculum, and present this as an option for them to consider as an alternative, if that's what you would like to do. If you like what you've seen and you'd like for your school to consider it, maybe even download the resources, maybe even put it onto a disk or email it over to them, make life a little bit easier. But the choice is theirs. And as a parent, through the parent consultation process, you have a right to be involved in that. Again, we've just put up a webinar with regards to parent consultations. It's on the YouTube page. So I'm just going to end the Q&A there. If there is anything else that we haven't covered, inshallah, we will cover it in the through the email dialogue that we have with yourself or on the website. So Brother Talal, if you could just move on to the next page. So as I've mentioned on a few occasions, our YouTube page does have all the previous webinars that we've done. So when we did launch the primary and the secondary curriculum, it's on there. And as of a few days ago, our RSE parent consultation. So a consultation, a model consultation that schools can use to present to their parents with regards to guidance, with regards to their involvement, with regards to the options that they have moving forward. So when you do get an opportunity, jump onto YouTube and have a look. And moving forward, inshallah, this webinar, as will the one from Friday, be uploaded in the coming days. Next slide, please. Within the organization, we've decided to create what we're calling an RSE hub. So it's a one-stop shop, one single place where you can find all things RSE. And for us, this isn't just about developing a curriculum, it's about developing a program. Next slide, please. Just go, yes. So within the website, you can find free RSE resources, okay? You, inshallah, can find some free training, which is coming soon. This is the next part of our proposal. And then there's some work we've done with regards to supporting schools in relation to parent consultation. You can download PowerPoint presentations, you can download model policies, long and medium term planning, lots of good stuff that's been developed. And also we've got a dedicated RSE inquiry email. So anything to do with RSE, any suggestions, any ideas, any comments, any queries, any challenges that you're having, email us. We've got a dedicated team ready to support you. Next slide, please. Events, as I've mentioned, we've got all of our events that we've done past and coming up on the page. So again, a click of a finger, you can go straight to them. Next. We've also got the facility for you to buy into the curriculum. So a number of people have asked, how can we access the curriculum? Can we buy it? Yes, you can. It's a click of a finger. There's a discounted price for member schools, those that are members of the Association of Muslim Schools, and a slightly increased price for those that are non-members. But again, in comparison to what's out there, it's great value for money, considering this is a bespoke curriculum, considering that it's been developed in line with current legislation, etc. It's a really good product. Next. And then the final part of the RSE Hub is FAQs. So again, any questions that are quite pertinent, questions that quite common, quite frequently asked, you should be able to find the answer to the question. With a lot of this website, what you'll find is that it's work in progress. It's something that we are developing as we go, and as we add more resources and as we get more questions asked, we do update the website. Next. Now, I just wanted to let you know we've got another webinar coming up on Friday, how are Muslim schools delivering RSE. This is going to be done with myself hosting, but with a panel, inshallah, a panel of experts, a panel of people who are have been involved in this journey with us or by themselves. And they'll be there to give you an insight into how Muslim schools have approached RSE. We know it's a challenging subject and it's had a lot of media and publicity around it, but we want to really share with you from a Muslim school perspective how it might be a little bit different, how we've specifically approached it, and how we see things panning out moving forward. So I would highly recommend those educators that are on the session today to share with your parents, prospective parents, the wider community. And those of you parents, if you wanted to look at an alternative opportunity and consider a Muslim school moving forward, this is a great way of finding out what your local Muslim school has planned for RSE. And then next. And then finally, there's a few opportunities to get involved. I just thought I'd bring it to everyone's attention. If you are a school that's on here and you'd like to get involved in the piloting phase, fantastic opportunity, great way of getting the full RSE scheme of work for free if you are chosen to be one of those pilot schools. We're looking for schools across Key Stage 1 to 4. We've got a couple of opportunities. We're looking for a lesson writer to join as part of Talal's team. We're looking for a trainer to support us with some of the training elements. And then finally, we've got a short little survey on RSE that we would like you to complete. Again, all of this research and all this background information informs us with regards to how we develop our curriculum and how we support our membership and the community as a whole. And as I mentioned earlier on, everything RSE, email us rse@ams-uk.org or jump onto the website /RSE. And then finally, a big jazakallah khair to everybody. Thank you very much to everybody who's participated, who's attended. We couldn't have done it without the support of the wider community and all those people who are behind the scenes. So thank you to Talal, Shazia, Hasina, Ashfaq Bai, and anybody else who's contributed today or in the past. We pray that Allah gives us success and inshallah makes this journey of us easy. And we pray that inshallah all of us as a community can unite upon this topic and come out strong at the other end. If you do have any suggestions, please do email us. But for myself, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.